So, hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of Unpacking Possibility. I'm your host, Traci Stein, as always. I'm so happy to be here with you. Today, we're going to talk about something that is so simple that we recommend to people or have recommended to us all the time. And it is one of the most beneficial tools, and it's free, but it's one of the things that can help us physically and emotionally and creatively in ways that a lot of other things don't, and that's writing. And specifically, we'll talk about two aspects of writing. One, writing by hand versus writing by typing things out. And typing's not bad. We're just going to talk about what the differences are and why writing by hand can have greater benefits. And then in the second half or later in the episode, I want to talk about a classic exercise, writing exercise that really isn't going to take much of your time. It's going to take maybe 10 minutes, 5 minutes even in the morning, and why that exercise has been so enduring, how it can benefit each and every one of us, right? And why it's worth doing. So you'll leave with a better understanding of the benefits of both writing by hand and doing journaling and so forth in general. And hopefully it will inspire you to pick up pen and put it to paper and see what kind of a difference that can make in your life. And again, it's one of those things that's so simple. And because it's old school, it's not a new technology. I think a lot of times we underestimate the power of writing things down. And before anybody has any objection to this, you don't need to be a great writer to do this. You don't need to spell well. You don't need to be great with sentence structure, punctuation, none of that. We're not even getting into that. This is not a course on how to write beautifully. It's how to use something that we all can do to feel, do, and live better overall. And again, for free. So without further ado, let's talk about it. So there are neuroscientific studies, psychology studies that have examined why writing in general, journaling in specific ways, is helpful for us. But the neuroscience part that I found most fascinating recently is that if you think about your brain as if it's another muscle to exercise, the most important body part we all have, arguably. Writing by hand exercises it in a way that typing doesn't, or not to the same extent. So, I want to talk about that a little bit. There's going to be no neuroscience jargon. You don't have to remember any brain areas, but I want you to try and imagine as we go along how this might work and how it might benefit you. But think about it. We talk all the time about putting pen to paper, right? Even though most people don't do that anymore. And most people of every generation now, they voice text on their phone. I'm very guilty of that because it's much faster than I can type. I'm also guilty of sending overly long and typo laden voice texts. Sorry, everybody. We talk about write it down, even though people are thumb typing in the Notes app on their iPhones, jot it down, writing as a data dump. We'll talk more about that. But the neuroscience research tells us that if we do actually write things down by hand, whether it's on a scrap of paper or in a notebook, they were talking more about writing in terms of journaling. But again, longhand with a pen or pencil on old school sheets of paper. But people tend to have better and longer lasting recognition of and understanding of what they're writing. It improves memory and recall of the words you're writing if you do it by hand, and there are good reasons for that. So, and as I talk about it, you'll probably be like, well, yeah, that makes sense, because it does. You'll also have a better conceptual understanding of what you're writing about. So if you're taking notes on some things, let's just say you are a student and you're in school, at whatever level, and you're writing notes by hand, it is a different effect on your brain than typing. If you are in a work meeting or you're taking the minutes for a meeting for some organization you belong to, first of all, I understand why if you're taking minutes, and you want to get more down or more down verbatim, why typing often will be the better way to go, or voice typing and AI will do that now. But if you're just hoping to get the essence down and the most important aspects of something, you're more likely to do that and exercise that brain when you're writing by hand, because writing by hand is a very complex process. It looks super simple. But when you're writing by hand, multiple areas of your brain have to work together very quickly, actually. And think of this as kind of a symphony instead of a melody, right? So lots of instruments working together, playing together to generate the music that you are producing metaphorically on the page. So when you're writing by hand, you're making fine motor movements with your hand and fingers. You are varying the pressure of the pen on the paper. You are making a lot of different shapes, the letters, many of which are similar to each other, and combining them in a multitude of ways to create different meaning, again, very rapidly. So your motor cortex is engaged, your visual cortex is engaged because you're seeing what you're writing, but you might also be visualizing what you're writing. And remember, we are writing down strings of letters and forming words that form sentences that are imbued with meaning. But these are very often abstract or intangible things we're writing about, something we understand, a concept, an emotion. If we're journaling, it's very often an emotion. Maybe we're talking about the reason for something or something in the future that hasn't yet happened and we are imagining it. So we're really engaging our brains in a way that seems simple from the outside, but it is quite complex. And so what the research has found is that we're more likely to remember what we write down by hand and make meaning of it. This I thought was very interesting. Cursive writing, especially. I'm actually one of those people, by the way, you may be too, that I do kind of half printing and half cursive. It's just something I've always done. I'm not sure what that means. Somebody knows, leave me a comment. But writing in script or in cursive is especially linked to better reading and math ability down the road. Now, I want to be clear, what they're not saying in these studies is that if you're naturally better at math and reading, that you're more likely to write by hand. That's not what they're saying. What they're saying is the act of performing the seemingly simple but neurologically complex act that imbues things with a different meaning and helps us encode meaning and memory better so we remember things better and do this quite quickly and engage all these areas of the brain is linked to ultimately down the road having better reading ability and better math ability. And I don't see a downside to that. I'm bringing that up because if you are a normal parent today, chances are your child is typing just about everything. Chances are you are typing just about everything. So, but when we do that, we're not exercising the brain in the same way as when we get out that old school pen and paper. So, we've talked about that cognitive processing of memory, visualization, pairing movements, right? To the meaning and to the things we are visualizing and the words and letters we are putting down and seeing on the paper. Now, again, there are times when you're going to want to type. If you've got a lot of stuff to get down and you want to get it word for word, that is the time to type or record. But writing can also be very therapeutic emotionally and actually has other physical benefits. So I'm going to skip around here. I have a bunch of notes that I typed, by the way, but I want to get to the idea of journaling as well, because journaling can be done either by writing in a journal by hand, having a beautiful journal, which I personally like the idea of, and a nice pen that you like writing with, and it kind of sets the tone. But journaling in and of itself, whether you're typing or not, There's research showing that it can reduce intrusive thoughts and avoidant thoughts if you've suffered something traumatic, you've gone through something really difficult, you're struggling with managing negative memories, memories of an event, if you're struggling with your emotional response to those memories. So, whether writing by hand or typing, you will likely improve your working memory. Very important, especially as we get older. Now, psychologist James Pennybaker has been doing this research for decades, and even early on, his studies and the studies of other people subsequently found that journaling about stressful events, traumatic events, that did in fact result in fewer intrusive and avoidant thoughts, improvements in working memory, but also other benefits. And some of the benefits might surprise you. So, fewer stress related visits to the doctor. Now, you might wonder what that is, but I can tell you anybody who's had a panic attack and the first panic attack landed them in the emergency room because they thought they were having a heart attack or they just couldn't breathe or they felt like they were going to die. It's very significant. So, reducing stress related doctor and emergency room visits, extremely important. And again, remember how simple these techniques are. Improved immune system functioning in people who, have a medical illness that impacts their immune function. Reduce blood pressure in people who've had high blood pressure. Generally improved mental health symptoms. So, whether that's less depressive symptoms or less severe ones, less anxiety, super important. Also, better grades. And one of the thoughts about why that might work is that you are making meaning out of something that's kind of this, how stressful events and traumatic events can feel kind of like an emotional blob in your mind sometimes. They don't feel necessarily linear. It's hard to pull a thread of meaning out of it, especially because they're things we wouldn't want to ever happen. I'm not suggesting that, oh, it's great to have a stressful event because we can find meaning in it. That's not what I'm saying. But if we're able to find meaning in it, we tend to cope and function much better, right? And we can't get through this thing called life without having stressful and sometimes traumatic things happen to us. So a simple tool like this that is accessible to everyone, that is free and can help us make meaning out of things that feel overwhelming, can help us literally get through our daily life much better. Other benefits in medically ill patients, just which in and of itself, a medical diagnosis or a medical condition can feel quite traumatic. It causes so many changes to our identity and sense of self and our ability to get through our days. So, benefits included decreased pain. Can't underestimate the benefit of that, improved immune function, as I mentioned, and more. So there's some debate about why this might be the case and why we might see these benefits. It seems like the most consistent finding is that, again, over the course of writing about difficult things, difficult events, difficult memories, difficult emotions, when people have been able to use more positive emotion words in describing their experience, like maybe where they are now on the other side of it, still allowing for the negative emotional words that come up because, of course, that's the case. But when their writing showed evidence of, again, meaning making, cognitive processing, so people who tended to include words like realize or because or reason, right? I realize that this happened, but now I am safe. Or because of this, I have grown as a person. The reason for my feeling like this is this. So there's greater understanding and that really helps people to cope and feel and do better. By the way, if you're in therapy, this is something definitely to bring up with your therapist and maybe do with your therapist or bring your writing into your therapy if you're open to doing that. But again, the writing itself can be very therapeutic. So the instructions generally are over the next 4 days. This is from previous studies. I don't think this is etched in stone, but these are the instructions given. And these are ones you can, again, go over with your therapist. But it was over the next 4 days, write your very deepest thoughts and feelings about the most traumatic experience of your entire life or an extremely important emotional issue that has affected you and your life. And in your writing, just let go and explore your deepest emotions and thoughts. You can tie your topic to your relationships with others, including parents, lovers, friends, or relatives. I'm reading this verbatim. You can tie it to your past, your present, or your future, to who you've been, or who you would like to be, or who you are now. So, in one of the published articles, that was the instructions that they said had been given to people in these various studies. Now, you don't necessarily have to do it exactly that way. You might find that you write about something that feels difficult, but not necessarily traumatic, or something that you want clarity on, something you want to make meaning of. As my disclaimer, I want to just say, please note that if you are struggling with something and you feel like your emotions are hard to hold, I would always say seek help first and make sure you have support in place in case when you write about difficult events and memories and so forth, you have the support you need ahead of time. But it's interesting, again, and worth noting how powerful writing can be, whether by hand or by typing in general. So that is that portion. When we come back from the break, because I have to take a break, but when we do, I want to talk about a well known type of writing exercise, who popularized it, and why you might want to consider starting that tomorrow morning. So I'll be back in a few moments. So stay tuned. All right, welcome back. So, in this episode, we're talking about writing and how writing can benefit your brain and your body, can help heal difficult emotions and help you make meaning so you can move forward. How writing can do everything from help you strengthen your memory to manage pain or unpleasant or difficult emotional symptoms better. Writing by hand has specific benefits that are different from typing. But if you can only type to write, do that. Better than not writing. And again, this isn't just for people who love writing. This isn't for people who are professional writers necessarily. This is for everybody, for you, for me, everyone. And you don't have to have a great grasp of punctuation, spelling, grammar, or whatever. You can be tired. You can have awful handwriting that it's even hard for you to read later. And I have to tell you, at this point in my life, because I write by hand so infrequently, although I'm doing it more lately, my handwriting is just terrible. So I would never be able to instruct anyone in how to write cursive or print or anything. And that's great because that means anyone can do this. So I wanted to talk about a very well-known type of writing exercise, well known in many circles, but not all, and that is the morning pages. I'm going to tell you the story of the morning pages. And even if you are familiar with this, it might be worth just kind of staying with me because you may not have thought about the specific benefits. You might just know that it does help you feel better to do it. So, Julia Cameron, extremely prolific and successful author and playwright. Julia Cameron's been around for decades now as a very successful professional. She's somebody who's been extremely upfront and open about her own struggles, though, generally. And I really respect that because by doing so, she it makes you feel when you read her book, The Artist's Way, which is a classic. It might be 30, 35 years old by now. There's a reason it's still a bestseller. So if you haven't read it, I would check it out. She's got all of these other books that have come out since then. I think a companion workbook and a journal worth checking out. But as I mentioned, you can do what I'm about to describe without spending any money at all, as long as you have some paper at home or a journal or a notebook and a pen or pencil. It's 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 deceptively simple. So the morning pages are again one of the simplest and most effective free tools. You're going to get up every morning, and ideally before you even get out of bed, you are going to grab your notebook and write 3 pages in longhand, stream of consciousness. So whatever comes to mind, doesn't matter what it is. It could be, yuck, I don't feel like writing today. It could be blah, 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 blah for 3 pages of longhand. Does not matter. I don't know what I'm going to write. It could be anything, because there might be days when you're like, I'm too tired to write. I don't want to write. I don't know what I'm going to write. Why am I doing this? Is this even beneficial? You're going to write all that down. But writing the morning pages is beneficial in a number of ways. It is like a data dump. So, all of the mental noise and mental clutter, all of the junk that's floating around all of our minds, especially when we're tired, we're stressed, we've got a lot on our plates, or we have something we have to do and we have a lot of resistance to doing it, including the morning pages. But writing longhand is the key element of this practice, that and doing it first thing. Now, I believe Julia Cameron was quoted as saying that, somebody asked her if you could have coffee, if you could get up and make coffee first. And what she said is she makes her coffee the night before and then has it in the fridge as iced coffee. And this way she can get right to writing. Many of us, especially after a certain age, will have to get up and go to the bathroom before we sit down to write. And that's fine. But as soon as you can after you get up, get to writing those 3 pages. And at first, it might feel awkward. At first, you might feel resistant. I have to tell you, it changes your life in a way that's hard to describe. It's so great to not overthink things and just put down whatever, and all these weird tangential thoughts that we all have that make no sense. If anybody were to read the notebook, they'd be like, this person is just like a ping pong ball bouncing all over the place. Doesn't matter, because it does several things for you. Among them, it helps to, again, clear that mental clutter. It helps to put the inner critic that so many of us have in its place. Your inner critic could be saying all kinds of things. There's no point to this. You're never going to be able to do X, Y, Z that you want to do. Fine. Write it down and write down your thoughts about the inner critic. Write down, about the sunshine coming in through your window. And now you've looked out the window and realized that your windows are smudgy and you need to clean them. And oh, how are you going to find the time to do that? And oh, how much laundry do I have to do today? Doesn't matter. Write it down. When you write things down, as I mentioned, you find the threads of meaning, oftentimes ones you didn't know were there. You can find that answers to questions you've had or solutions to problems throughout the day just become clearer. You might find a lot more of those aha moments because you've created space for them and you've trained yourself to get the words out of your mind and onto the paper in a more concrete way. People report having a lot more good creative ideas. So originally, Julia Cameron wrote that book to help writers, painters, other artists get out of their own way and get unblocked, because writer's block and creative blocks are a very real thing, but it really helps in all areas of our lives. It can help us to be calmer and more present. It can help us to just be more insightful and intuitive. I have absolutely found that my own writing generally improves if I've been doing the morning pages. I feel like I am less reactive when things are annoying or things are frustrating. It creates a sense of meaning and centeredness, even though you're literally writing a stream of consciousness. The writing itself does not need to be great. And in fact, it shouldn't. Don't correct misspellings, punctuation errors. Don't worry about punctuation. One of the rules or the guides for this would be to keep what you write private. You don't need to share it with anybody else. You don't even need to go back to it yourself and ever read it again. Years ago, I took a workshop, like a one-day writing workshop or creativity workshop with Julia Cameron at the Open Center in Manhattan, and, I remember somebody asked her, "Do you go back and reread these notebooks? What do you do with them?" And she's got a gazillion notebooks from writing over the years, and she said sometimes, like, eventually she'll just go through and throw them out because the purpose isn't to generate anything useful other than clearing that cache, doing that data dump, and exercising that muscle, just letting stuff go. But amazingly helpful as a creative tool. It feels very therapeutic. I guess the last thing I would say, moving on to one more exercise that's worth doing in terms of journaling, would be I talk about hypnosis all of the time and how the movies in our minds shape our reality. We all go in and out of these trance states every day, all of the time. You know that because you've maybe heard me say that before, but if not, now you do. Now you know it. But journaling and writing about something as we would like it to happen, it's an incredibly popular manifestation tool or technique. But I think one of the reasons why it works, if we just want to talk about it from a psychological perspective, is because the mental rehearsal happens. Our brains see the things we imagine as nearly as real as the real thing. And sometimes it's hard for our brains to distinguish the difference. So if you think of something you really want to do and how you ideally want to do it, and you allow yourself to get out of your own way enough to not have to write down, well, this won't work because, but instead focus on what you want to unfold and how you'd like it to unfold as if it's happening now. From a very mundane perspective, your brain has now experienced the success that you hope to achieve. And by the time you actually get to it and do it, it's like you've done it 100 times. So the anxiety about doing something new or the pressure to do it well and the anxiety that that generates kind of goes by the wayside. Things that your inner critic feels are impossible or that you don't deserve and all of that. When you're writing, remember I said you're making meaning and you're engaging various aspects of your brain and your mind. They're not exactly the same thing. That's a whole other episode. Watch my episode with Howard Eisenberg and the one with Mona Sabani. Both of them talk about consciousness and the difference between the brain and the mind. But for our purposes here during this discussion of writing and journaling and visualization, your mind and your brain are getting to experience firsthand the thing you want to do and the way you want to do it when you are journaling as if it is happening right now or you've already achieved it. And the more multisensory you can make it, the better. So, those are the reasons why writing, and especially writing things down by hand, old school, can be beneficial for you. I'm going to say mind, body, and spirit, right? Because what's more freeing than feeling better and believing you can do something you want to do, clearing away the mental clutter, and getting clear on who you are and who you want to be and how you'd like your life to be. And writing is an excellent way to do that. So, if this podcast episode was helpful, if you enjoyed it, please let me know. I want to hear from you. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. Please do like, share, and follow. It actually does help me continue bringing more content to you. And as always, until next time, be well.